Let's try and stretch our minds a little to embrace the world of ancestors. So let's talk ancestors. Where do you begin when you talk about ancestors? I've probably talked about ancestors for most of my life. The general idea of carrying ancestors along with you through life seems to have faded away entirely, and it's nowhere near the way it used to be a long time ago. That's what we've got to try, if we can, to stretch our minds to understanding so that we can reconnect with something of the way we used to think. We need to constructively call upon our imagination, and we've also, most importantly, got to ditch the New Age ideas of this. I know it's very difficult for some people to separate New Age from ancient thinking. If you prick your finger and draw blood, you will see the blood of your ancestors. That is how it was always talked about to me. If they hadn't been here, you certainly wouldn't be here. So that's a good thought, and it's a start, I think, to try and think this way. Ancestors used to be with you all the time, in the air, around you, ancestors looking on. And there's one important thing to remember when you're thinking about connecting with ancestors of a long time ago, and that is that if they have been through all sorts of things in their life and they've experienced a few knocks and they've come out the other side, then that is something that we still need to think about. We still need to remember them for that. They came and went, and now we are here to come and go too. But we need to embrace a little of what they used to mean to people in earlier times. So if I think of my ancestor, I want to think about a realistic person, a flesh and blood person, a person who fitted into history somewhere, somehow. If you picture a hunter-gatherer or someone from an earlier time, then try to be very practical about it. When you're trying to work out where your ancestors are and who they are, it is essential to be realistic about it. It's essential to base everything on earlier principles, hunter-gatherer principles, and then, in turn, to base everything on natural world values. I talked about this in the last Halloween video. The natural world values should be at the root of it all, at the heart of it all. You've got to understand that principle and apply that to yourself. As soon as you start to do this, then looking back won't be so difficult. I can only draw your attention to tree roots and to the branches of a tree. We today really represent the branches of a tree, while the ancestors represent not only the roots, but the actual seed that began everything. It's no coincidence that we say family tree. The world tree, the tree of life, existed in many ancient cultures. And why was that? Because trees came long before mankind did. We are derivatives of Earth, derivatives of all that Earth is. So if we are not seeing ancestors in this way, as the roots and as the original seed, then we're sort of floating on air. We're sort of a branch that's not growing out of a tree, but that's growing in the air, sort of foundationless, which traditionally creates the breeding ground for shadows. And we are, actually, in these current times, foundationless. We end up having to build a foundation, make it up, build it beneath our feet. So what are we standing on? So what we've got to do is not just look back to the past, but look to natural world values once again, which our ancestors would have carried along with them. And they would have got theirs from their ancestors. I suppose in many ways, rather than saying we have to look back, I think it's a good idea to say we just look. We look across, or we look at. We could even see it that you could say we can look forward to understanding natural world values and hunter-gatherer principles. As nonsensical as that sounds, looking forward to look back, what we're looking at is the actual reality of how people used to think. And that is eternal. Try to look at your ancestors in a more cyclical way rather than a linear way. Try to see it like you see the seasons, recurring. That will connect you to the essence of eternity more than anything else. Also, it's a good tip to relate to your ancestors in the same way you'd relate to a story, an ancient story or a fairy tale or a folk tale in many ways. Try not to see them as being flimsy or made up. Keep that sense of realism. Certainly don't fall prey to this kind of image. I'm sure ancestors would never have looked like this or even posed like this. Look at them like they've created a story that provided a foundation for the story you're living out now. So don't forget to keep a sense of wonder and mystery about the whole ancestral situation. Be childlike about your attitude, not childish, but childlike. Don't act as if you have to know everything. Allow for a sense of mystery to prevail. That will take you closer to them than anything else, because it means that you are humble towards them. Ancestors were long considered to reside in the stars, and as far as I'm concerned, they're still there. Your line began with a seed, a hunter-gatherer seed, but that wasn't the real beginning. Because just like a tree, your line was seeded from another line after line with no real beginning and no real end. That takes some thinking about, doesn't it? Enter the world of time. Enter the world of development, farming and the like. Enter the world of colonization and civilization. Enter the world of land ownership and progress. Enter the world of technology. Enter the world of community breakdown. And lastly, enter the world of the loss of ancestors who simply fade away. The ancestors of long ago in your own line carried a knowledge that you have probably lost. I say probably because most people have. I only talk about it. I only go on about it because of the line I come from and the way it was passed down to me and what I inherited. So you need to re-establish a link with ancestors of long ago, further back than great-grandparentage or whatever. So if we're looking to ancestors like that, we're missing out a big chunk, really. We're missing out a chunk of people who existed just before us for a couple of thousand years. And I think behind this is a valid point, because if we can start to think as the earlier ones thought, and we start to accommodate natural world values, then imagine what we're going to experience. We're going to leap back to people without whom we could not exist today, and that is going to give us far more richness in our lives than we might otherwise have. And of course, I have my own ancestors helping me with this. Ancestors that were there when I was little and are still there now, so they're not really going anywhere. And these stretch back to a Neolithic age, and that's a long time ago. But they've stood by and watched the generations go on, plus seeing the world deteriorate by degrees. I can't imagine what that would be like. Pretty horrific, I should think. But we must, of course, remember that they existed in a world of strong community, not a world of strong individualism. Hence, their way is still always to be there, to help those keen to help themselves. If I hadn't had that help in my own life, behind the scenes, sort of unnoticeable, and yet it's been there, and I've known that it's them that's there. If I hadn't had that, my life would have been far, far worse than it has been here and there. People might have heard me talk about Puro. You would have read about Puro probably in We Borrow the Earth. And he is a really, really trusted ancestor. And I first met him when he communicated through my great-grandfather when I was knee-high. And now he communicates through me. And before we go into thinking, well, isn't that a bit mind, body, spirit? No, it's not a bit mind, body, spirit. All this came before mind, body, spirit was ever even dreamed up. This is something that is very old. And if we can look to what kind of values these people in our pasts carried along with them, how close they were to the natural world, how close they were to the other world, if we look at all these factors, we're bound to start inching our way towards what they are, what they still are, what they always were and what they still are. That's the way it is. So what I'd like to do is to help you to understand how an ancestor can be watching over you when you don't even know that they're there. You need to have a bit of constructive imagination. I say constructive imagination because some people run away, they run wild with their imagination. And usually that's the influence of New Age and mind, body, spirit as well. We've got to re-establish links with our imagination as it used to be, when it is fueled by the other world. And we've also got to be constructive, so that we're not thinking of airy fairy ancestors with wings on and doing all sorts of odd things. And believe me, that does happen. I've talked to people and they come out with such a lot of bullshit. I can't if I was your ancestor, I'd be off and out of it. So you're on your own now. In all seriousness, I mean, I laugh, but these things do happen. But we need to just re-educate ourselves on everything. Everything I ever talk about on this channel, it should be part of an education an educational process that we're all traveling through and trying our best to get our minds around what the original ancient life was all about. Now we're talking about going back to an original seed, right, where ancestry is concerned. This isn't purely to do with physical, biological life. This has to do with the way we think, with preserving an expanded mind, which we all would have had in earlier times. Now, I often call this primary organic thinking, and I do this because I'm trying to cut through all the rubbish that we tend to get fed with today in our modern world, just to keep us happy, just so that we'll hand over our money to somebody who says they can introduce us to this, that, and everything else. You might, of course, start thinking about rewilding projects, that which takes us back to that external thing called nature. Of course, rewilding is certainly better than doing nothing at all, but that's not exactly what I'm talking about, because if we are rewilding, we've got to have our thoughts, our feelings, our general makeup educated so that it accompanies what we're doing. We simply need to recondition our minds, if you like, our thoughts, the way we communicate, the way we process, the way we reflect. And that, of course, is why many experimental prehistoric living projects fail in our time, because people have a very, very different mindset today compared to the one they would have had when they were living wild. But if we can get to something that's very real and that really connects us in a much more detailed and simple way with those ancestors that are at this very moment probably looking on and thinking, oh, I hope they'll start to see us as we are, as we used to be, and as we still are. If we can introduce ourselves to anything that's anywhere close to that, then that's going to be a fantastic thing. And we'll have cut out all the dross, all the in-between stuff that we might want to wade through. So I think this will take a bit of a series of videos so that we can gradually adjust. So you just have to keep checking back. And as we go through seasonal changes, acclimatise ourselves to the natural world, acclimatise ourselves to the other world, as it always was, then we can hopefully start to feel their hand holding ours, and that's what we need to have. Goodness knows this is such a difficult world to live in these days. It's gone so far away from the way we used to be, and with really, literally, no hope of returning for society. But that doesn't mean as individuals we have to accept that. We can make our own way, do our own journey towards our ancestors, and know that they're there. And all that will cut through everything we have to tolerate in our everyday lives, which we don't always like. So first and foremost, we need to return to thinking about natural world values, and we need, once again, to think a little bit tree. So if you picture a tree, you see a tree and you think of the roots. Now think that's where your ancestors are going to be living, and they're always trying to pull you down to the roots. They're trying to pull you back to primary organic thinking. They're trying to pull you back to thinking in an ancient way, to thinking simply. And their hands are reaching out to you as I'm speaking at this moment. They're there. And as we come towards winter solstice, they're going to be there even more, because that's a huge, huge seasonal change. So it will be good now to start thinking about them. And also to start thinking about how they affect your life. They are there to help guide you through your life and to do the best you possibly can with it. So once again, let's cling on for dear life to what the natural world is and start to close the door on the New Age ideas. Open the door to all those wonderful things that our ancestors carried with them. And then let's just call them towards us and say, I'm here. I know you're still there, but I'm here. Please give me some help in my life.